The MILA first inaugural session is called to order. This morning, rather yesterday, we left saying that we wanted to continue on a discussion, which we will. And for the rest of the morning also, Senator Munya Barnes will chair this morning's session that has to also do with cruise liners. But before we do that, I would like to have everyone please recognize a colleague of ours, a former colleague of ours, and who's also very instrumental in the MILA get-together, primarily by his introduction of a resolution, which you all have a copy in your binder. And I'd like to recognize former Senator Frank Blas, Jr. So we had received the resolution from CNMI, and he quickly responded, of course, with a resolution accepting and agreeing with the language in the resolution from CNMI, and he had actually gone to the islands to start the conversation, but today is then the result of a lot of informal discussions that we've been having together, not just with colleagues of ours, but even throughout the region from with APIL. So, Speaker Joe, I know we left off with you, and I didn't want to leave you hanging with the discussion on the inter-island transportation, so I would like to go ahead and have you then continue and to have the conversation going. It's also being recorded, and even if we were unable to bring in some officials from the airport, I think it's important that at least we start the conversation, and then we can take it from there, maybe in the next session that we have, or even through other informal discussions that, you know, we get, because always usually the work behind the scenes that would actually, come up with the results that we need to see. So I would like to turn this over then to Speaker Joe De Leon Guerrero then to start the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On yesterday's agenda on free trade, item number 3 is inter-island air travel. Mayor of Tinian raised this issue to the House, that the need or the possibility of having commuter terminals to service smaller carriers. According to the mayor in his letter to the speaker, FAA regulations exempt smaller carriers from having, for passengers from having to clear TSA, especially I guess in this case, 2 U.S. jurisdictions, that there is that waiver. And the benefits of it, one is, of course, remove the hassle of having to go through TSA, but the others is also reducing costs. There could be lower costs for passengers and for their goods. We haven't explored this. We have raised it to our Commonwealth Ports Authority officials, and they would be getting back to us to confirm whether in fact the FAA regs does say this. But because the mayor did officially present it and asked that we make it part of the agenda, we're putting this forth. We do understand, Madam Speaker, and I was hoping that there would be airport Ports Authority folks here, that there are issues with opening up a commuter terminal, and I think it has to do with the airport itself, the facility, and the contract, I guess, with United, who has, what do you call this? I guess provided funding for the expansion, and I think any use of the facility for a commuter terminal would have to clear with them. I don't know if that's the case. This is what I've been told, but I guess we can table this matter for now and maybe bring it up to the appropriate authorities and see if that is a possibility on our end. I guess we will confirm what are the thresholds or the requirements, and if this is in fact the case with the FAA, we can get back to you, Madam Chair, maybe table this matter until our next meeting, and we can see if there is a possibility. We'll also look further as far as what type of benefits there are for our travelers. Maybe this may be one way to just make travel among the islands more economical and also less hassle. So that's it, Chair. And maybe we can, you do have committee chairs. Oh, the Senator from Tinian, I'm sure, is also aware of this issue. You want to touch on this matter?
Yes, I'm opening it up, of course, to our members to at least expand the discussion. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we want to be able to flush out exactly what is it really that we want to do. And I think because you're right, we don't have the government officials. We don't know what are some of the restrictions if, especially for agencies outside of ourselves that we have no control over, especially federal agencies. And if FAA or TSA, those individuals who have to be brought to the table at least to start the conversation. There could also be a creation maybe of ad hoc committees on your side and our side to at least find out what are some of the restrictive legislations maybe that we have and how we can get the dialogue going and possibly make a report back to the body either on our next meeting or, just through communicating via telephone or what have you. But, this is a matter I know that has been discussed many times, but we've never really done, anything because it makes it difficult when we're doing this individually. I would also like to let you know that as the president right now of APIL, the Association Pacific Island Legislatures, that we are setting our General Assembly theme around airport transportation and port transportation. So those are the two major subjects for next summer, and it'll be hosted by Marshall Islands. And so in December when we meet next month, and our members, of course, is your speaker and Senator Regis. Pete Regis, I'm so sorry. My dear, your hair may be whiter than mine, but I'm having more senior moments than you. But those are your members, and our members, of course, is Senator Duenas and Senator Respicio. So this topic, and the reason why I say this is because we've never really used our influence as in a united front. And I think that now with MILA and then with APIL, and now we also have the Micronesian chiefs and executives meeting in Saipan, as a matter of fact, next month, that we would like for them to pursue the matter. And I think with our joint effort, somebody's going to have to listen. So, I like to flush out a little bit more in terms of, to be very specific in terms of what it is that we want to maybe assign individuals like ourselves, what we want to discuss with our airport, people. And is there a possibility that maybe this conversation can be even taken to our delegates in Washington to also help us if it, involves FAA and TSA? So, I mean, that's just my suggestions, but I'm looking to our colleagues as well. Senator, I'm sorry, okay, Senator Cruz?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You're correct. Let me just explain my experience back in 2012 when we came here in regards to what the Speaker Guerrero was saying. We came here in Guam by Star Marianas just to experience how the treatment when the Star Marianas land at the international airport. We waited for 20 to 30 minutes at the ramp, waiting for all authorities that are expected to meet the flight. So we waited there for 20 to 30 minutes, and we were concerned about our tourists from the Sinamay, that would like to visit the island of Guam, and then that's revenue for Guam as well, and we would like to share, with the idea with Guam, Madam Speaker. So we were trying to get a clearance from the authority rather than going through to the TSA, which is the international flight that are going through that due process. And imagine when international flight comes in, there's a lot of passengers lining up, and these inter-island services are just like hopping from U.S. to U.S. territory. It's not coming from outside the U.S. territory. So we went to the governor's office to meet with the lieutenant governor at the time, Governor Tenorio, and he calls all stakeholders like CPA authorities and quarantine custom. And we discussed over this matter as to how we can, conveniently service our tourists coming to the island of Guam, as well as vice versa going back to the Sinamay. And according to the information, the operator of Star Marianas was told to come up with a plan. And they submitted a plan, and still the authority haven't given them the green light to have these hopping flights be given the opportunity rather than going through the due process. Anyway, when we came in, we waited for 20, 30 minutes, but we went through that where I think the baggage there, which is I guess that's a lot better than going through the due process of going to TSA. Anyway, these stories have been already cleared in the Northern Marianas, which is the same process as here in Guam. So we're trying to find a way as to how we can conveniently, service these tourists so that they can, when they go back home, they can promote the Sinamay and as well as Guam as a good place for, vacation, and not put them on the ramp for 20, 30 minutes. And imagine staying in an airplane is so hot, and that's not a good, experience for visitors to have that kind of, treatment, waiting in the airplane for that long. So, and I think they've discussed this with FAA, and I've heard that the FAA has, I think, told the authority that they should have a commuter terminal rather than sharing with international terminal for domestic flights. So I hope that with this meeting we can come up with something that will assist this operator so that they continue to do business in the Sinamay, and as well as extending this, to the island of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Yamashita, and then Senator Dueñas.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I really do appreciate that this issue is being raised. I really do hope that all of the different organizations that are in place at this table and outside of this table really will succeed in addressing the way our people are being treated. Whether it's inter-island or international, I really believe that the industry needs to learn how to treat us with respect and decency. I've just returned, and the type of treatment that I received is unacceptable. The amount of money we pay for tickets is the same amount of money that others pay. Therefore, the treatment that we should be receiving should be the same. It is unacceptable for our people to have to wait for 20 minutes to be cleared. And I think the efficiency of this industry really needs to be raised as an issue. Why? How come? And what do we need to do to make it better? Whether it's a commuter terminal or whether it's training, whether it's what does cultural competency mean, and how do you respect customers in this part of the world? It could be that sometimes they don't know what they're doing by not looking at me, by not helping me with a smile, or by making crazy statements when they think I can't hear them. But whatever the case may be, this is an opportunity to say that this isn't going to happen anymore, and we shall try as much as possible to put our issues on the table. I certainly don't know enough about Homeland Security, about Customs, about TSA, about national security. I don't know enough about it except as a passenger. And I do know that every place I go, and I have to take off my shoes again, I don't understand those kinds of issues. Again, I don't know enough. But what I do know that it seems that the treatment is demeaning and for me unacceptable. And when I see our grandmothers and our mothers being treated like this, it's wrong. So I really appreciate this leadership raising it, and I really do hope that we're able to realize steps in how to make this better. Because this is no free ride. We pay for our tickets. And as we do, then that means that service should be there. So I thank you for raising it. Madam Speaker, I don't want to break protocol, and so I'm asking for guidance, but I do know that our colleague, Senator Blas, does have some information about the processes and some work that's being done about a commuter travel initiative at Atinian, and I wonder if we can give him a privilege of the floor.
I will. As soon as I get Senator Duane not recognized, yes.
Thank you.
Senator Frank Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and Speaker Guerrero, and members of the CNMI delegation. I guess after hearing my colleagues' comments, maybe it's MILA Tacuentos. You know, I really appreciate the efforts here. As you said, Madam Speaker, as the president of APIL, MILA makes sense because of the fact that regionally, as the Marianas, you know, we have probably some of the more immediate issues together within this narrow region of the overall FSM. And as the good doctor explained yesterday, and many of the discussions, and I'll lead to a final point, is the fact that we are sitting here as legislators to deal with policy, obviously, that is on the other end executed, the executive branch. But we have, of course, our role in two ways. One is to ensure that restrictive legislation is relaxed and enhanced and made possible and up to date with what, you know, are the changes, ever-changing times and regulations, as expressly pointed out yesterday. And the second point is the fact that as we talk about regional collaboration and regional opportunities, those things cannot be realized unless we fix these operational issues. And so it's very timely and very appropriate of what we're doing. I guess to make my final point is, you know, the good speaker moved to table, and obviously good Senator Cruz, Representative Cruz, made the point of, once again, another very operational issue, very technical issue, and supported by Senator Yamashita. I would just propose as we move forward to adopt these issues in the resolution as per the working points, what we have to do to bring the leadership of all of these organizations together so that we as MILA can have outcomes that are reflective of what our role is. Do you need legislation? Do you need, in the meantime, we know now through oversight that the director can issue that directive. Look, this disease exists with the cattle in both places. Let's remove that restriction and let's be able to have commerce with the cattle. Now the airport issues, the transportation issues, we know, as you said, Madam Speaker, we have federal issues. So there are a lot of working and moving parts, but I still think we are already far ahead in terms of these major issues we've discussed so far. I would just say, with the precious limited time we have to the balance of today, if these issues are so overwhelming that we, with an aggressive agenda that we get down into it, that's fine too. But I would just say that because this is the inaugural meeting, I think we can adopt a larger issues, and as you said, Madam Speaker, with working groups under that, to really identify in subsequent correspondence what are the deliverables, what are the major issues, because this is a regional concern, and for those two reasons, it's hard to envision regional development and expansion of commerce when we have the operational issues that exist. So with that, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to provide that comment because maybe that's guidance for us to get through, that we really take a big bite out of things and the smaller bites are at the level of our governments working together. And I'm so glad, Madam Speaker, and in closing, that you have given that courtesy to my good brother and Senator Blas to provide some updates. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're very welcome. Yes, the chair recognizes, of course, former Senator Frank Blas Jr., who I know has this as it's an interest of his when he was a member and even when he was running for Congress, and he still continues to keep himself involved with it. And we would like to hear from you, from your research and discussions that could enlighten us as well and probably lead us into certain directions. Senator?
Guam Customs and some of the carriers. I got it. And that discussion, at least for here on Guam, was the possibility of using the terminal facilities that still exist or that are still around on the other side of the terminal as we know it, the main terminal. One of the concerns that they had was with regards to the traffic between the larger commercial airlines and the smaller commuter flights, and getting these individuals, access to the concourses and the ramps in those areas. So one of the discussions that they were having was the utilization of a little known, actually, commuter terminal that exists by the tower on the other side, on the Barragata side of Tizan, to be able to service a lot of the commuter flights in and out. This will do a number of things. First off, it will relieve the congestion that exists within the airport. You don't have to basically compete for concourse or ramps with the larger airlines, and it gives more ease. Because you're not talking about huge aircraft and a number of different passengers. You're only looking at maybe one or two, personnel, customs personnel, and TSA personnel to be able to handle this. So there is an ongoing discussion. I think that, and I see that Colonel Scambaluri is sitting in the back in the room here. he can also probably bring some more to light with regards to this. Um, with regards to federal issues, and some concerns in this thing, why reinvent the wheel? What we're asking for here with regards to taking care of our commuter passengers and our commuter flights, something that is done in major hub facilities, airport facilities throughout the United States. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. So if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. It can be done, and it's just a matter of getting the resources to be able to do this. So I think this is something that, with regards to a checkoff list, something that this body, in looking at, getting together with those agencies or entities that may right now be seen as obstacles, is actually working with them to be able to clear this matter out. I agree with Senator Cruz from TNN. This is a great opportunity in as far as continuing commerce. We've talked for a long time with regards to how we're going to be able to share in as far as the visitors and the true Marianas experience. When people visit the Sierra Maya, as well as people visit Guam, and they go back and forth. You really truly want to experience the Marianas. You've got to be able to do this, and giving them the opportunity through this commuter flights and ease of access in and out of an air terminal is the right way to go with this. So there is that conversation, ma'am, that is existing. I think it's just a matter of getting those same people back to the table and assisting them and moving them forward, helping them to move this issue forward. And I think this is something that can be resolved in very short time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe what we can also do here is that, because we're looking at several departments and agencies, of course we don't have FAA and we don't have TSA, but we have Customs and Quarantine, and I'm wondering now, through that process, I mean, the passengers, the inter-island travelers go through, of course, they follow FAA, they go through, you're saying they go through TSA as well? And then ultimately, before they exit, they go through Customs and Quarantine. Is that correct? So may I ask the representatives, Mr. Scambilleri and Mr. Bloss was here, I think I saw him earlier. But Ralph, maybe you can assist us. What we're discussing is the inter-island travel, and of course the ultimate goal would be a commuter airport, so to speak, within the main terminal, a commuter terminal. But the process, I mean, and the reason why I ask this question is because I remember, like, for example, if we were traveling from here to Hawaii and we go through, of course, immigration, that's a little bit different, but the concept should be the same, that when we land in Hawaii, rather than go through again immigration, because we've been cleared once, that then it'll be automatic just to go down now to Customs and Quarantine. Is there anything to have that seamless kind of transition for the inter-island travel, especially among, of course, our brothers and sisters, up north?
Senators and senators from the Northern Mariana. Thank you, Senator Bloss, for bringing that subject up. But kind of important that they had the Guam Airport Authority here, regards to their facility. Many years, I think, as many of you know, I've been in the agency since quite a while, and we used to have the Commuter Terminal, which took care of all the commuter flights from the Northern Marianas down at the old terminal, our original terminal, and we used to process all the flights there. But eventually, it was taken over by a private entity, an airline. So that kind of shut that down. And then, of course, 9/11 occurred, and then they threw all the activity up to the main terminal because of security reasons, and of course of TSA and all the layers of security that had to be done. But I think the thought, if I recall, and Senator Bloss was talking to me on the side, there was a thought that with I don't want to speak on behalf of the airport authority, but there was a thought that to build or reuse one of the facilities across the runway to be part of a commuter terminal that will help the small aircrafts that are coming in from the Northern Marianas to do that streamline or accommodate the small aircrafts. Then they won't intermingle with the huge terminal, and there'll be an easier process. So I don't know where that conversation is now with the airport, and also regards to the other layers of security, regards to TSA, because coming in from the Northern Marianas to Guam, they do not need to go through CBP, Customs Border Protection. They just need to go process through the customs and quarantine due to the nature of agricultural items that have to be inspected and other matters. But there were many discussions pertaining to that movement across the runway, or even the same side of the runway, to build a commuter terminal to take care of all those activities that are coming in from the outer islands, just basically from the Northern Marianas.
Thank you very much for that information. So with our colleagues, of course, now before we move on to the cruise liners, because what we're doing, of course, our legal counsels are preparing the language for our resolution or our communique, is that we want to be able to specifically say what it is that we want to do. So, and as the chair, I don't provide that type of information. I can give you the parameters of what we have discussed, and so I'm looking to you now to assist us and our legal counsels back here with the language, unless you've already, legal counsels, provided any type of language for us to consider. I had asked earlier for our legal counsel to check a law that we had that was passed, a bill that was passed into law, which was to authorize, of course, the airport to go out and borrow monies for what we are calling, I guess, a second and a third phase of course, expanding our airport. And I was trying to find whether there's anything specific to a commuter, but I can't see it. I don't see it.
Madam
Yeah.
Speaker?
Yes.
Yeah, I just, the airport executive, Charles Atta, will try to make it down here. But aside from that, he is sending some updates on terminal upgrades and the like with regard to the recent borrowing and the next phases of projects. So he'll be sending something momentarily that I might have to
Okay,
add.
so-
And hopefully he can make it. He's going to try to change his schedule around.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you, Madam Speaker.
thank you, and I appreciate that. And we'll revisit that subject again when the representative gets here. But just so that our legal counsel can put the language together, what I've taken some notes, of course, that what we would like to do was to look at to open a commuter terminal. And one, of course, is to make it efficient in terms of how our travelers are to transition. And let's see what else. To look at barriers and challenges and requirements, both from FAA, TSA, and C&Q, so that then we can make this what is the word that we have here? I'm trying to find. Does anybody want to help me here to reduce, of course, Speaker? Yes, help me.
Thank you. I don't, how about just a broad language to the effect of allow for consultations between the CNMI and the Ports Authority. Allow for consultations to establish affordable and user-friendly commuter services between Guam and the islands of Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. Something general that sets forth the intent, and let that be, let them work towards that and look into the various, what agencies need to be consulted and what regulations need to be reviewed, but something general to that effect.
So legal counsel, yes, they're not in the, so. I'm sorry. We're going to move on to the other agenda, which is on cruise liners, and I would like the senator who's oversight with the Guam Visitors Bureau, and I'm going to have her introduce, of course, who she has invited for this morning's discussion. And you should all have, by the way, an agenda that was provided by the senator, and you should have some articles as well that, again, was provided as part of your packet. Senator?
Sidzus Masi, Madam Speaker, and buenas and half a day todos hamsus. Manana Sidzus, many of God's blessings for all of you here. This morning's session of the MILA Association will focus on cruise liners in this region. I want to give you a little journey on its inception when we started to talk about bringing in the cruise line industry. I want to say that in March of 2000, the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures, through the Board of Directors, Resolution 3701, they requested that all member governments to support the marketing of Micronesia as a new destination for the cruise industry. On March 7 of 2003, the Micronesian chief executives, in their first joint communique, endorsed the idea of regional cruises as a crucial element in a regional economic development strategy that will focused on developing regional tourism. At the 17th MISES, which is the Micronesian Chief Executive Summit, that was held in Guam last year in March of 2012, the chief executives once again reaffirmed their collective support for the development of a cruise industry for the region by endorsing the presentation made by the Guam Visitors Bureau on the progress of the Micronesian Cruise Association. And between fiscal years 2008 and fiscal year 2012, over 39 port of call visits have been made by cruise liners to Guam, and it generated over $5 million for Guam's economy, and paying almost $800,000 in the business privilege taxes and payroll taxes. Our goal for Micronesia in general, and the Marianas in particular, is to continue to promote our region to cruise liners and as an attractive and new destination for port calls, and to eventually have a dedicated regional cruise package. Our unique cultures and our histories are attractive to cruise passengers who are looking for a new, exciting destinations. However, in order to transform this concept from a mere idea into a reality, we must take a long, hard look at the lessons that we have learned from prior port calls and the information we've received from those in the industry to date. This morning, we have with us, and if I may, in no particular order as listed here, from the Guam Visitors Bureau, the General Manager, Mr. Carl Pangilinan, thank you for joining us. From the Micronesian Cruise Association, We have Mr. Jerry Paris. Send him a seat for being here. We have from Homeland Security, Mr. Pete Leon Guerrero. Yeah, Ports. And also, as noted earlier, Mr. Ralph Scambaluri. And then we have from, I want to say immigration? Customs and Border Protections. We have Mr. Ronald Laguanya from Guam Tour Guide. And I want to say from Inscape Shipping, we have Mr. Ariel Dumapit. So at this time, Madam Chair and Speaker and Mr. President, I would like to yield the presentation over to both Mr. Perez and Mr. Pangilinan to start off the presentation, and then field any questions from any of the supporting members that are here, and if they'd like to share a couple of minutes for their presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator Barnes. Talking about developing a cruise industry for Micronesia obviously touches on many different issues. And depending on how you approach the development of this industry in our region, it requires a sequential path to development. And regionally, we're working on this at the moment, but I thought that since the focus this morning is on MILA, that I would, first of all, if it pleases the group, I would read into the record some observations on the cruise business regionally, and then focus right in to suggested agenda on what MILA can address more specifically to Guam and the CNMI, if that's okay. Okay. So the Micronesia Cruise Association is not a new concept. As you know, for over 10 years, this has been kind of talked about. And it was only in recent years, under the chairmanship of the good Senator Barnes, and prior to her, Senator B.J. Cruz, that some focus is really brought to bear on trying to develop this business as a way to help diversify, the tourism base, and as a way also to tactically inject some cash to the lesser developed islands in the region. So MCA's vision of a globally sought out regional cruise destination offering exceptional itineraries to diverse lifestyles, budgets, and overland experiences is really very much in line with the expectations and the mission mandates of both the chief executives and legislative bodies of Micronesia, specifically MCES and APIL, as you alluded to earlier. And we can more particularly describe this goal as building collective regional credibility to capitalize on socially responsible and economically sustainable economic opportunities, to encourage the promotion of and support for authenticity in each of our island destinations. Facilitating also regional collaboration, such as what's happening this morning, in elevating market visibility and demonstrating a compelling value proposition among all stakeholders in our region, and finally, providing advice as appropriate on island-specific cruise development initiatives. I will not go into a lot of detail on the economic impact of this business because I think it's probably well established already. It's just a question of how much which island would benefit on these visits. So I would skip that portion and just mention that the regional benefits that we can derive from a thriving cruise industry include diversification of our leisure market mix, the injection of economic vitality to small isolated island communities currently threatened by outmigration that would hollow out the community's socioeconomic and cultural viability, and the benefits from supply chain business opportunities. So the short-term vision is to start building the institutional and physical infrastructure for this business in Guam, the CNMI, and the rest of Micronesia. But as the good senator alluded to earlier, the long-term vision is to have 1 or 2 vessels home ported in the Marianas so that we can develop the inter-island cruise opportunity similar to what you see in like Hawaii, the Caribbean, and other locations. Having said that, Madam Chairperson, members of this committee, I thought in consultation with the Guam Visitors Bureau and other partners in the region that in particular to Guam and the CNMI, we should work out a development framework that addresses real specific issues that can enhance the unique and memorable destination experience of Guam and the CNMI. And I believe the agenda item on cruise has been circulated, and so I would just like to quickly go over the way we frame this is to address some specific issues that need to be worked on as an agenda item, hopefully for this body to adopt so that we can focus in on very, very specific objectives. So with the goal of providing a unique and memorable destination experience, we've come up with 5 specific objectives that I would like to share. Of course, number 1 is maximizing shore time. There's some empirical evidence in the Caribbean that the longer the shore visit, the more spending per passenger occurs on land. And so the way to maximize shore time, of course, is to expedite government formalities, whether it's customs, immigration, port clearances, and also to fast-track security clearances for transportation and other ground services. The second objective for fulfilling the goal is to showcase our destination cultural heritage, history, and attractions. And this can be done by focusing on development of cultural and natural attractions, whether they're option tours or on their own. Shopping and entertainment, of course, is part of this shore experience. The third objective is to ensure safety and security ashore, specifically physical safety, environmental safety, health, sanitation, and so on, and making sure that there's immediate access, heaven forbid, to emergency services should that be required. The fourth objective is improving communications between and among all points of contact in the value chain, which means shipping agents, tour operators, government formalities, village mayors, the media, and providing English-speaking guides, because we are at the moment short of English-speaking guides. And a fifth objective that we've come up with is developing and implementing protocol and standard operating procedures pre-arrival of the vessels, on arrival and departure, and the ground handling vendors and other providers. And at this time, I believe that the Guam Visitors Bureau also would like to add a 6th objective to this agenda item, which I would pass on to my colleague here, Carl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perez, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker and Senator Barnes, and buenas and hafaday to all of our visitors. Again, my name is Carl Panglinen. I'm the General Manager of the Guam Visitors Bureau. I'd like to start off before going into the sixth objective, just by stating our obvious support for the MCA. You know, there's so many reasons why we should support an organization as such, and Mr. Perez touched up on a few of them. Diversification, of course, is one of the obvious reasons why. It's one of our core objectives in our soon-to-be rolled out Tourism 2020 strategy. which would include, it was part of our long-term strategic plan. And then second, and the most obvious, and something that we at the Bureau at least have been very loud about, is our shortage of hotel inventory. With the shortage of hotel inventory, I mean, it's no secret that we have basically floating hotels that could come and visit our shores. And just one of many reasons why we are very supportive of this initiative. I think from a timing perspective, pursuing this initiative, we couldn't be at a more opportune time. I know that this is something that has been years in the making. This is my first year at GVB, and I couldn't be more excited to rally behind this very initiative. And I just want to share, again, before I go into the sixth objective, just some of the outlook from the industry as we see it within this region, and as some of the experts have shared with us. I mean, the cruise business is the fastest growing segment in the leisure travel market. Guam and the Marianas altogether, I mean, we are a leisure travel destination. And it makes perfect sense and fits right into our lane. It's a new vacation product for Asian guests. There's 1.4 million Asian cruise passengers at this point, and the forecast by 2020 looks to be tracking to about 4 million Asian cruise passengers. The Asians prefer 4 to 6 day cruises, and there's very good news within the region in terms of terminal growth with new facilities in Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, and China. And so, with that said, again, the timing of pursuing this initiative couldn't be more opportune. We need to start really thinking about a way forward, and I really applaud all the effort that are done at the various levels with MCS as well as APIL. I really like the idea of rallying together as a region. I think there's the old saying that there's safety in numbers, and there's strength in numbers. And if we as a region rally together, I think we can accomplish a lot more in terms of the way forward. 2 points that we just really need to keep in mind. Number one is the total visitor economy, and Mr. Perez pointed, just throughout the value chain and the supply chain, there are so many benefits to the cruise industry that we can realize by attracting a lot more cruise business. And the second thing that's very important, I sit on the executive board of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA. And one of the key objectives in all of the ports, not just the airports, but even in the seaports, is this notion of a complete passenger experience. And the complete passenger experience, it doesn't just start with the carriers, or in this instance, the cruise lines, but it also is with regard to the processing agents, the regulatory agents. And we're hoping to extend our hand out to our federal partners. Mr. Perez alluded to the fact of quicker processing with regard to customs and immigration, and if there's a way that we can streamline that, knowing what their mandates are and what their objectives are, just to add to that complete passenger experience. And so that leads me really to what we feel is our sixth objective. And as we're still in very much penetration mode and in growth mode in this industry for the region, we want to propose that we have a regional focus in terms of what port landing fees there are. As I said, we are in penetration mode, and it's important that we make ourselves attractive. And I'm not saying to give the store away, but we need to be reasonable in terms of the port landing fees that we charge across the region. And once we get more of these cruises established, and once we prove that, we all know that we have the destination to provide, but once we prove operationally that we can handle a lot of this traffic, I think at some point down the line we can look at perhaps raising the fees, but I think we should consider some sort of attractive introductory rate, if you will, in terms of the landing fees, and that's really the sixth objective that together with the MCA, the Guam Visitors Bureau will support. So thank you very much.
So as you can see, Madam Chairperson, the laundry list is quite lengthy, and each of these objectives speak to a whole series of action items to be done. And I realize that we can't resolve all these issues at this one meeting, But I think a recommendation would be, starting with this group, form working groups to really detail out each of these different tactics that need to be worked on, and at an appropriate time come back. But as a policy framework for developing this and MILA's involvement, this would be our suggestions and recommendations.
Thank you very much, the both of you, for this. Actually, this is the first time that we're able now to look at what it is that we would like all of the government entities to do, not just CNMI and Guam, but as you alluded to earlier, because there's a resolution too that was passed at APIL, because we wanted to promote all of Micronesia, because this is what they consider now the undiscovered areas that people from the world would like to come to explore. And so these are very good guidelines. The question that I have to try to bring in, if I may now, just to take us to the very top, the number one, because these are very critical, and I'm glad you put it as the first and foremost to be addressed, because none of this could happen unless we bring in our customs and immigration people, and of course the port clearances. The discussion has always been, and I'm glad too, that you brought up number 6 on the fees, whether it's port fees or individual passenger fees, because I heard about experience to Palau. So if I may, with the government officials and any one of you, please, if you can address what then would be the requirement, what your requirements are. But I think even more importantly is, because we're talking about just our neighbors, is there any way in which, again, the transition can be much smoother, much more efficient, and that if it's cleared, and this is and this goes even beyond that, but I think that if there is a way similar to what they do in Europe, that when you travel in Europe and you're going on a tour to different places, that once you get stamped in one, it's clear, and you get clear in every port of entry. Is that something that could be considered as well here on a smaller scale, to see how that's working before then, as Jerry was saying, and is that this can be expanded throughout Micronesia?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the record, again, my name is Pedro Leon Guerrero. I'm the Director of Guam Customs and Quarantine. And before I throw it to Chief Scambroy for some of the details of the customs clearance process, I just want to say that, when cruise lines come into Guam, we know a long time away, months ahead, when they're coming. We know when they're going to be arriving. We know when they're going to be departing. And so we know, you do the math, how much time they have on deck, how much time they have on land. So our job in Guam Customs is to, the objective is speed, to properly clear customs clearance to our arriving passengers. And Chief again can get into details about that. But the fact of the matter is, it is a process that we take along with immigration, Customs Border Patrol. We also work with TSA. We work with the port. It's a total team effort, And so again, it's not a surprise when they come, when they go. And what we need to do is maximize the time that our passengers can enjoy the nice destinations and the nice shops that we have wherever they are. And so that's always a challenge for us. And we throw a lot of folks to that challenge every time we take. Our job is to get them cleared properly, quickly, and have them go and enjoy the island. So we're always going to look at ways to improve it. You may have we have some ideas also, and again, I'll throw it to Chief for some more specific details. Thank you.
I want to pass it on to Mr. Colonel King from USCBP, and then I'll expand after.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I'm Steve King from Customs and Border Protection. I'm the Port Director for the Customs and Border Protection DHS folks here on Guam. When we process the cruise vessels, we do the immigration process, and so we're interested in facilitating, expediting the passengers off the vessel as fast as possible. So we do take some measures right now to go ahead and do that, and one of the things that we do is we do pre-vetting prior to the cruise vessel coming in. We have all the manifest information, so we go ahead and vet that, determine who has a visa, who's a U.S. citizen, who's a visa waiver entry, and so then we're able to take a look at that. We also staff the clearance of the cruise ship the same way we staff the airport, the same ratio, officer to passenger, to go ahead and expedite the passengers off. It takes generally 15 to 30 seconds to process a passenger. We don't collect the biometrics like we do at the airport, so it's a lot faster. Basically, that's all we're doing. We're looking at the passport, checking to see if they have a visa, if they're not a U.S. citizen, and stamping them in. They need a paper I-94 to do that. It could be a lot faster. Usually, what happens is we'll have passengers that, are lagging behind, but we have to clear all passengers first. So usually, it's about an hour and a half before we can get all the passengers done. So it's not really a long amount of time. And then after that, we do the crew. So we do the passengers first. They can go ahead and disembark, and then we do the crew.
Good morning. In regards to Guam Customs and Quarantine, there's multifaceted things that we do pertaining to a floating city, which is basically a vessel that comes in. It's almost like a floating city. If we're talking about the destination from the Northern Mariana Islands to Guam, I think we have a time frame about 8 to 10 hours for that vessel to arrive, that cruise ship to arrive from Guam. In regards to other destinations, it takes 4 to 5 days or even up to 9 days from Australia to get to Guam. So there's a bunch of things that Guam Customs does anticipate to process the passengers. Many years ago, Colonel King knows, and myself and historical guys in Customs, before 9/11, we used to have this en route inspection, and that process really speed up the processing of passengers. That regards to clearing them, regards to the passport, regards to the quarantine side of the vessel, regards to the public health side, and everything else pertaining to the customs and quarantine procedures to arrive into Guam. So after 9/11, that didn't occur anymore because of the security issues and all. So we have not done any en route inspection since 9/11. We do have almost the same ratio as U.S. CBP, probably 14 officers for vessels up to regards to where the vessel's coming from, the origin. If it's high risk, low risk, we'll throw in more officers to try to expedite. Like I said, 50, like what CBP does, the same. Basically, it's 30 to 50 seconds to process, but it's all based on the head purser for the vessel to get those documents, to get their passports, to get everything ready, their customs forms and all, to get those passengers to get to customs and CBP. What's different about Guam is that we don't have a proper terminal. Arriving terminal here at the commercial port. We don't have the facility to exit passengers or vessel passengers or the crew to go to an area to do any type of inspection. All the inspection is done on the cruise ship. So the port will probably in the future hopefully be a proper terminal, a proper place that passengers do get off and have a better surrounding instead of going into a shipyard. So that's one factor that could help out also too. We do have a boarding team that goes out before the vessel comes in, before the breakwater, as regards to if the waters or the seas are safe for our officers to go out there to start clearing the passengers before they get into the dock or get tied up. We start doing the quarantine side. We do also have, I don't want to talk on behalf of the Coast Guard, they have the Coast Guard element also too, in regards to passenger vessels coming in. There's a lot of layers that we need to do before that ship ties up. So sometimes we get tied up, the officers get maybe close to 2 to 3 hours. It's up to how many passengers on the vessel. It might take 2 to 3 hours to clear a ship. It could be less. It's really the coordination within the shipping company, and also to get those passengers up for the clearance within a certain area of the vessel to get them out. So I could ask any other questions later on if you want to bring it up. But it's a huge complex to process a ship coming into Guam. But there's things that we could do to remedy certain things. But really, the port authority is really not built to accept any type of cruise vessels. I think to have some kind of true terminal, like in Florida or other ports in the U.S. that does processing. If I'm correct, Colonel. Also, just give you some numbers. These are just rough numbers. We cleared 16 vessels within 3 years. This is passenger vessels, and it's basically almost 5 vessels a year, cruise ships, with a total of about close to 20,000 passengers and crew. So that's what's occurring. This is just rough numbers. I just got in a few minutes ago. I asked my staff to just get it for us, but we could get the accurate numbers for regards to that. Guam Customs do clear the passengers. All those statistics that we get out of the passengers are given to Guam Business Bureau, to Mr. Pangilinan agency, that he could use those numbers to develop his game plan to find out if the market is there's a feasibility for more cruise ships, which they are. I think Guam is a good destination. I was talking to a head person, someone that was part of a vessel that came in a couple months ago. They do like Guam because getting their provisions here in Guam is quite cheaper than other destinations in Asia. The liquor, the food, the produce, and everything else. It's something that they like to get their provisions here in Guam than other docks or other ports of visits.
Thank you. With that presentation, I know that a lot of our colleagues here have some questions to ask from the panel here, but I'm going to go ahead and ask if we can continue with the members present. And also joining us, ladies and gentlemen, is from the Port Authority, General Manager Joanne Brown. Thank you very much for joining us. At the table right now, I'm going to go ahead, and we have several more speakers from the Inchcape Shipping. Ariel Dumapet, would you like to share some comments?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ariel Dumapit, and I work for Inchcape Shipping Services as the general manager. I would like to share that we have this new principle called Silver Expeditions, and they intend to visit several islands, including Yap. Pagan will be the first stop, and we are currently working this process with the U.S. Coast Guard, with CBP, because as we all know, there's no customs office or immigration office over there, or Coast Guard office, so we're trying to clear that out first, and hopefully that will not be an issue. This is a new company that has several ships and want to see all these islands in the Marianas and the Micronesia, and they will start this first voyage by September of 2014. They will spend about 5 to 7 hours in Pagan, and then head to Saipan, Tinian, Guam, Yap, Chuk, and we don't know if they're interested if they will proceed on going to Maug too. And there's another one, the Caledonian Sky, that wants to do the same thing, but this will all depend on the success of the Silver Expeditions call to these islands. And like I said, we normally work with the CBP, Customs, and with the Visitors Authority. On Thursday, there is a new group that is being formed in Saipan for the purpose of having the visit on Pagan an enjoyable one. So there are, I believe the governor has been invited also to attend that meeting on Thursday. And on Guam, we will do the same on meeting with the Guam Visitors Authority, of course, with the port, and talk about on how we welcome them and make them enjoy the island of Guam.
This is, it's really good to see you give an example, because that's one area, that's one issue that we need to clarify, and particularly with the federal officials. And Colonel, I'm glad you're here. Typically in the past, some of these vessels have to really go all the way to Saipan before they go back to Pagan. And in the last few years, there's been one or two calls that have been canceled because they just can't go down there and go back to Pagan and then around. So is there a way that in their particular case that can be resolved somehow? I mean, what would be a suggested way to solve it? Because this problem also is similar to the Micronesian islands, whether it's in Yap or some of the eastern islands.
If I understand correctly, you're saying it's coming from foreign, then it goes to Pagan. I would have to go ahead and take a look at that and run it through my headquarters, but I think it makes sense to me that we wouldn't have to worry about clearing anything going to Pagan, since there's nothing there really. No one's going to get on or off permanently, so I think we could wait till it goes to Saipan, but I'd have to get clearance from CBP headquarters.
Answer?
Yes. Yeah, the ship is coming from Japan before heading to Pagan, and then Saipan afterwards. So that would be, they will be grateful for sure, to hear that. Thank you.
At this time, we'll go ahead and ask General Manager from the Port Authority, Senator Joanne Brown. Thank you for joining us.
Or bad, but appreciate the invitation. I just want to give a general overview. Certainly, the Port Authority pretty much, the role we would have is having a facility, obviously, for arrival and departure. The other dynamics that go into the marketing, and certainly the interest in the cultural aspects, and creating a desirable environment for people to want to go visit, certainly is the bigger picture. But I think the other reality we need to deal with, and it was mentioned a little earlier, is our capacity. And I know this is a challenge not only for Guam, but certainly for Saipan and our neighboring islands, is actually having the facilities and create the type of image and impression, certainly when people get off a cruise ship, that you'd want them to have. Of course, you go to our international airport, and for people who have not been out to Guam before, it's quite impressive. I mean, you could go to airports in the U.S. mainland that look off the beaten path, and they're nothing to brag about. You go, wow, this is the airport. Everyone wants to go to Orlando and Disneyland. Well, the Orlando airport's not that big a deal. So it's the impression that's created. Right now, when our cruise passengers come to Guam, they come into an industrial area. That's our largest area, obviously, where our piers are. But it doesn't create the kind of environment you think of when you're probably thinking of traveling to a tropical environment. One of the things that we're looking at is the repair of the Hotel Wharf. I don't know if you're familiar with Hotel Wharf, but many years ago after the war, it was created as an ammunition wharf for the Navy. Navy essentially built the port of Guam. And that particular facility is coming close to 70 years, and it's quite aged, and there's repair work that needs to be done with it. And we're also looking at extending out the pier maybe another 3 to 4 feet that will accommodate a deeper depth, because right now it's about 27 feet in depth. So obviously that determines the size of vessel that we're able to have come into the Port Authority. While Hotel Wharf is not as large, certainly, as our main wharf areas, it certainly could create a facility where our cruise ships could come in, an environment that's more welcoming, perhaps more tropical than warehouses and industrial activity and containers, to improve that reception that they will receive. And then certainly there are different things we can do. I mean, other jurisdictions, certainly if you're going to Florida or something, these areas that have the main cruise ship industries, they have beautiful terminals and things that are created. We will not have the space, I don't know if the case in Saipan, but definitely on Guam right now with the current expansions that we're doing to the port, most of our space is just taken up with cargo and materials that we have coming in, and including our break bulk, our non-containerized material. I mean, we're under currently a $50 million expansion with money from DOD through the Maritime Administration that's being funded through the port. We're the largest. This expansion will make us even bigger within the region among our neighboring islands, but all of that growth is primarily intended to address the movement of commercial cargo, not for cruise liners. On average right now over the last 3 years, Guam has received 3 cruise vessels. We have 2 primarily from Japan and 1 that comes from Europe. The European cruise ships have an average to 600 to 800 passengers per visit. In the case of our 2 Japanese visits, that averages between 15 to 1,800 passengers. Most of the visitors during this time spend less than a day on Guam. And certainly they coordinate with our tour operators. We have to coordinate through customs, certainly to make every moment they have, because they're here for a very short time. I mean, normally they come in early morning, and before the evening's done, they're cruising out of here. I'm sure we would like to extend that probably by a few days, but that's also, I'm sure, dependent on the attraction and the market, and then, of course, how you coordinate with other destinations that one may be traveling to. But there are things that can be done to accommodate that. We certainly feel that if we can address the repairs to Hotel Wharf and provide that, maybe there are things we can work with the Visitors Bureau to make that a more welcoming environment. But you don't necessarily have to have a huge terminal that, is going to cost multi-million dollars to do that. I mean, you simply can have, they have different things, for example, like the type of stairwell arrival. Because right now, when you get off a cruise ship on Guam, you're just walking down that stairwell right to the side of the ship. There's nothing fancy about it. And certainly if you're persons with disabilities or whatever, that doesn't provide you the kind of reception. And certainly if we're looking at, older, I don't mean that in a negative way because I'm getting there myself, but, older passengers that have time and money on their hands, well, that's not the, even now, I don't know about your needs, but I don't necessarily know that I'd want to go climbing down the stairs that exist now to get off a cruise ship coming into Guam. But there are different types of stairwells that could be put up. I mean, remember the day we had to get off at the airport, we had to walk in the tarmac, right? Well, it's kind of like what it is now. But there are different types of equipment that can be brought in that we can actually purchase that's sized to the type of commercial vessels that are coming in for cruise liners that we can get. They design them, they can modify them so that you actually, it's like your gateway into arriving into Guam from the ship, that transition period from the ship to actually, getting on the ground. And those things are something more readily affordable. They're not cheap, but they can be designed, they can be tailor-made to our specifications and what our needs are. And that's just something that kind of brings, the scale up a little bit in terms of the reception that visitors can receive. And those are things that more immediately or more readily can be purchased than this idea of doing some big fancy terminal. Because I'll tell you right now, the Port of Guam does not have the location or space to even accommodate such a thought. We just don't. It obviously has to be next to one of our piers, and it has to be accessible. You have to look at, just at least facilities that are available. This issue with customs is also a challenge because of the clearance time that passengers have to go through. Hopefully at some point, I know the security issues, that has expanded over the years, but it doesn't make it and doesn't facilitate the interest of people wanting to come if I've got to wait 2 or 3 hours to get off the ship, get processed, and then, I've got a few hours to go run around the island, and then I've got to hurry up and get back on the ship and go again. So there's a lot of hurdles that need to be looked at. There's some things that are more feasible. They're more within our reach. We'll be getting our next cruise ship, I believe, on December 30th, right before the New Year's. They generally do come around this time of the year at that particular time. So certainly the market is there. It's not at a level we'd like to see. I mean, the advantages certainly of cruise liners, and I know Jerry's talked about this at some of the regional meetings we've attended, is we don't have to build all the hotels and the major infrastructure that come with the increased numbers. You do like the benefit of the fact that they're on a vessel, that they get to come in, hopefully spend money, enjoy their time, and then get back on and hopefully go to their next destination. And so there are pluses to that. But there are hurdles that are going to have to be addressed in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the reception, in terms of what is being offered to the visitors that are coming there, and also the security issues. I mean, it on average, I've only got like 24 port police officers, and it takes on average 15 port police officers to be on duty when a cruise ship comes in order to meet the security requirements. And that bill is paid for courtesy of the port. It doesn't, there's some things we can charge to the shipping companies coming in. Those type of things are not necessarily on the list, and they're very high-priced items. Hopefully, once we get our camera systems up, we'll be able to reduce that cost. But you need to quantify all of that. I mean, the idea is wonderful. It's a very romantic thing. You think of Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet on the cruise ship, and that's a wonderful romantic idea. But in order to get to that point, there's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of planning, and also the reality of space, because building wharf space is very, 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 very expensive. Just doing the repair work we're going to do to Hotel Wharf is going to cost millions of dollars. So we need to deal with that reality. We need to address how you're going to go about funding, hopefully what the benefit back that you hope to see in your economy that's going to offset that. But certainly Guam, we have a certain capacity. Is it our primary mode of business? No. And one of the interesting things I found out is that even in our modern day and age where most people travel, through air, cruise ships still have the luxury of gaining priority in terms of berthing space at our ports. So if I have a commercial vessel coming in and I have a cruise ship sitting in that very same spot that commercial vessel needs to come in to unload its cargo, that cruise ship has priority. So we also have an issue to deal with commercial shippers because, time is money for them. Moving cargo is time and money for them. So those issues need to be addressed, especially if you don't have the capacity to accommodate it all at the same time. So those are things that certainly, even though we're not in the cruise ship industry, so to speak, I mean, we provide the venue for entering and exiting for Guam, but these are things that certainly would need to be taken into consideration. Is it possible? Yes, very much. Could we expand it? Certainly. If the market interest is there, most definitely. But we just have to take into consideration that there are infrastructure needs that are there, and there's some things that can be scaled depending on how much we can invest. So pretty much that provides my general overview from the Port Authority of Guam with regards to the cruise ship industry here.
Thank you, Senator Brown. At this time, I go ahead and entertain Mr. Ronald LaGuardia.
And she has relocated to Australia now, but the company still keeps going on. And I'm the little guy. I'm the front line, and I'm glad all the stakeholders are here because, like Mr. Jerry Paris and Senator Joanne Brown said, that those are all the key points. But in just as I gave a handout to Ed earlier, I got some input from some of the tour guides around the island, and this is just part of one of the things that I do part-time. And you wouldn't imagine, having done this with the cruise line industry for the past 12 years, the passengers that come to Guam, they describe our island as a paradise island. I mean, I can't believe it, what they say. It's a beautiful island, and we take advantage of it, and we don't really understand what they're saying sometimes as tour operators and tour guides. But as they exit and they board back to their ship, they say, you have a beautiful island. And I am so proud that they say that, because it's deep within my heart as a Chamorro, as the people come here from all around the world. Just recently from the last ship that came in, from Holland Cruise Liners, the Amsterdam, they came all the way from Canada. And they've really experienced it. Just the 4 hours that I've had them on the morning tour and the 4 hours in the afternoon tour. Sometimes it's 3.5 hours. I took them on a southern tour around the island, and they just enjoy it so much. And I just think about Big John down there at Imatic in Fort Soledad. And that guy is a wondrous guy for the people of Guam. Him and his Carabao Betsy, and his jokes and his laughter brings the livelihood to these people who have never been to Guam, and they don't know much about the history. And it is us guides that tell that story, and we need to tell that story because the majority of the guides that I've worked for, that I work with, are local guides. They pull from the best. Tony Ramirez Malia, he is an incredible guy. He has so much knowledge that I wish you could download some of that information into my mind and continue on that perpetuation of the culture and our people and the story. And we have lost the late Tony Palomo. He was another incredible guide. We have Bob Balahadza. He's another guide. We have Jarina Blas and many of the locals. These are the top guides that are pulled out under last minute or emergency just to take them away from their jobs, and they pull the best because we've experienced so many instances that many of these passengers have experienced sometimes in a very undesirable way. Like, for example, the restrooms. At one time, Lou from Discover Guam would just personally go out and paint and clean up the restrooms the day before the cruise liner is going to come in. But she'd do that, and then the next day, it's kind of messy already, and they would come in to use the restroom, and they'll come back to the bus, and they'll tell me, Ron, we're willing to donate to your country. I mean, that hurt. They said, to your country. And I said, it's just a little island to myself, And then to clean your restrooms. But things of that nature. Those are just some of the experiences. But the story and the hospitality that the guides portray out there is the key. At times, I purposely tell them to look at that particular site to your left because there's an old refrigerator and stove on the side of the road as we go through the scenic route, Route 4 down the southern part of the island. And it is very important that we instill into our people within this scenic route, because there's only one route down to Umatak, the Maleso, and Nalahan. And that some incentive for our people to decorate and to clean and make their homes nice, like in American Samoa. They're so proud of their island, and I think little things like that to allow them to experience and see the beauty of our island. Because I was surprised when they said that we live in a paradise island. But we do, and us in the Mariana Islands now, and just hearing Pagan now is a beautiful, pristine island, and that is going to be occupied with the Marianas Training and Testing Center, which is on the list for the EIS for the sonar training in Pagan, and I think we need to hit that because they will be in Saipan tonight. They were here last night. They will be in Tinian and Rota the next few days. But we need to stand together maniluhod at tafandanya sa importante na protehi dyan ta adahi itanong ta. Pinuet tana mo na Marianas kini sanizum. So the experience that we have, it's in the newspaper that I just cut out on November 9th that in Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, they are spending $8.7 million in developing their pier because it is a $150 million industry per year with the cruise line industry, with ships that can have a capacity of bringing in 6,000 passengers. So they're willing to accommodate that now, and that would be a great number because I've experienced the Sky Princess, the Sea Princess. There are a whole bunch of them, and I've kept a list of them, but the Love Boat is the Sea Princess by those of you who don't know that, but that's what I was told to many of these passengers. And it is just it's just something that we need to get together. And I'm glad Mr. Perez and the rest of the stakeholders are here, and I believe Coast Guard should be here as well, and other stakeholders, because I'm glad Senator Brown here has really hit the button on we need to capitalize on this industry, because it's so dear to my heart, because when I go out there in the front lines and board the buses, I see that they don't have a happy face when they come into the bus, because they come into a facility where it's not accommodating for the cruise line passengers. But at the end, it shows that they really love to see the island. They don't stay long. Like she said, they're very quick. One of our stops is Jeff Pirates Cove for restroom stops. You know, it's in our packet that we need to go there because there's a mini museum, but the restrooms are clean there, and they don't buy a lot of souvenirs. They're here to experience to see, and they see the bunkers down there, and they see Shochiyokoi's museum there, and they just go in 5 minutes and 10 minutes, they go back out. They're ready. They're loading the bus at the time when I'm eating my ice cream right there, enjoying the view of our island and how they're experiencing it. But this is just from where my perspective is that from the tour guide industry, again, we are. It's always either we need to care for our artisans, our cultural practitioners, because it is they who bring in the image of our island. And it's usually they ask for either free or cheap, or they're shunned away. And we need to stop that attitude and highlight them as ambassadors. They are the reason that makes us unique. We live in a diversified world. However, in order to be diversified, you have originality, and we are original. Because sometimes I just wonder what makes the people and our visitors always tell us that we are one of the most beautiful people in the world. It's just that I guess we've gone through a lot of historic atrocities, and our parents has reared us to be humble and loving people. But I'm glad that this forum has come along with the Mariana Islands, because there are ships that come from the Northern Marianas, and we need to perpetuate the image of a beautiful paradise, like they say. And I've done this for 12 years on a part-time basis. I do it on weekends. They call me because they want to hear the story from the people who are the local guides. And I just have the recommendations are there that I submitted. These came from our guides, and I don't want to elaborate because many of them have been touched already. But Jerry, you've got it. We need to expedite the movement, and Ms. Brown here also stated, and let's bring the environment of the welcoming of a place where they can arrive and experience. Have our local vendors out there. Have them share that, then and bring about the entertainment and the cultural components that makes Guam and the Mariana Islands unique. So, if anything, I'm glad that you told me that December 30th is the next ship coming in. And I sure hope I participate in that. But things of that nature that we can, maybe we'll have an incentive for our people on the scenic routes. Get a tax break for beautifying their homes, because that's the only road there that they go through. And beautify the island within those areas, because one of my favorite places is Fort Soledad. And I always tell them the story of the sound of music. Many of you just take it for granted, but you go up there on a beautiful sunny day and you see the mountains and the bay there, where it has the beautiful turquoise waters that you overlook at Maleso, and they don't have those in those areas and where they come from. So people from Germany. We also have one point I wanted to say, that we also have cruise liners that come from the ship and board to the plane. So that is another experience that we need to look at and expedite the process, because we gear our tours based on them exiting and moving into the bus as we transport the next group down to the Port Authority of Guam. But it is just something that is very lucrative for our economy. Let's work on it. And I want to thank all the stakeholders that are here, and I speak for the rest of the guides that aren't able to be here. And edza babesongan manilu maninaw. Dongkulo na sa Diyos Mosi, no na yun esti na oportunidad, Madam Speaker, Madam Chair. But it's high time that we look into the matter. Sa Diyos Mosi.
Buen provecho, Saina Laguatnia. And ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about what we need to share from the complete passenger experience to government expedition to border patrol and immigration. At this time, I know that our colleagues have a lot of questions, but I'd like to yield to Mr. President, if you may, so you can share your thoughts and then open the table up. And then after that, we'll share with the Vice Speaker, who is the chair of tourism here.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. And, just listening to all the stakeholders here and all the concerns apply to the CNMI, I think we also have a bigger issue with the infrastructure that we need to have in CNMI, probably particularly Saipan. And now that Pagan is on the table, it is a beautiful island. And that's something that I'm certain that cruise line, the passengers would really appreciate it. I would like to now yield to our Senator Regis. Earlier had a question.
Thank you. Earlier I was thinking that the statement made, by Jerry to make a point that passengers from cruise liners need to be cleared, and the sooner we clear them, the more money they spend. I think this is something we like to hear, but I wanted to find out if, and I think Mr. Scambolari and Pete Leon Guerrero, clarified this. That's why I didn't continue to raise my hand. In the past, we have this pre-clearance, custom quarantine and immigration. I think it's CIQ pre-clearance of ships that are coming in. So those officers would board the ship coming from the point of embarkation and then on to the destination in the CNMI. And I believe it works the same way with Guam, if I'm not mistaken. And those really save time. So by the time it gets to CNMI, they're already cleared. But when 9/11 came about, I think that took a hit there, and now you're pre-clearing them from outside the reef, or not sure.
You're absolutely right. They used to be called en route inspection years ago, before 9/11. What we do is, and General Manager at the port will elaborate also too, if she wants to. We usually catch the passenger vessel outside the breakwater if the waters are safe to board with the tug, going out to meet the vessel with the pilot on board, the pilots to bring the vessel in. So we try to get there with the pilot to get on board. Then we can start doing the process regards to the clearance, regards to the public health side, and also the items that are in the vessel, basically the perishable items, the food items, and things that need to be offloaded. But we don't bring all 14 of our officers to go on the tugboat and go out there and do high sea boarding, because it's not safe. We do the little things that needs to be done, that once it pulls into dock, then our officers will step in, the 14, and I think also CBP does the same thing too. So some of the elements are already being done in regards to the clearance. Our officers that board that vessel at the breakwater start to communicate with our officers at the dock site in regards to what they need to do, or what we have to look at, and if we do have some certain passengers that have some interest with us, we will look into those cabins or those areas or crew members. And yes, you know how it goes when we board vessels. So that's the only time frame we have within the breakwater, which by the time the vessel comes in, I think if I'm correct, General Manager, maybe about an hour to come in and dock and tie up, and also that gives our officers time to get around the vessel, check everything's secure, their bonded duty-free areas secured, the trash are secured, and also the Coast Guard, I think, also boards with us also too. So we try to speed up the process. That helps a little bit, but eventually when we get the ship ties up, then we just basically just flood the vessel with our officers to do the processing of the passengers. So the more officers we have, the faster we get to get those passengers off the vessel. But once again, with the coordination with the shipping agency and the head person of the vessel, it's a huge coordination between ourselves and CBP with the agent, and also with the Coast Guard also too, and the port also.
And I would like just to expound a little bit on Senator Regis. Prior to the immigration takeover of the CNMI, we would actually send our immigration employee to Japan if it's a vessel coming in from Japan, and on the way down they will clear them. So by the time they get to Saipan, they're already cleared, so there's no waiting period. Same thing if it's coming from Australia. The cruise liners will actually pay the cost of the employee, so they will fly to Australia right on the ship liner, and then on the way down to Saipan, they will clear their immigration documents. And I'm not sure if that's something that CBP will be able to allow cruise liners to pay their employee there, wherever it's coming from. And by the time they get here, they'll be cleared.
Yeah, that used to be a practice many years ago that we would engage in, but since 9/11, we no longer do it. We could entertain the requests. The ship agents could submit the request to me, and I could submit it to headquarters to see if they would approve it. But I think historically, those requests now are not approved. So, but we can try it.
Well, and I think we wouldn't hurt for us to write a letter for both sides, and if it's a vessel coming from Japan, I think there's more security, or less security rather, because of the relationship that we have versus a vessel coming from other countries, I guess. But that'll be determined by your department.
But if I could expand that, in the event the vessel comes from the Northern Marianas to Guam, that the CBP aspect is not needed, if I'm correct. Right. And the customs can do the en route inspection from Saipan to Guam, which we could put our officers on board, which will be basically, I don't want to go over, that the agent will pay for the services for the officer to go from point A to point B to Guam. But that element in regards to CBP does not have to be on board, just Guam Customs, okay. If I'm correct, which I am.
Anyone else from the CNMI legislature that would like to ask a question or comment before Senator Taimino?
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Chair. Yes, good morning to all. One of the questions I'd like to, where's the gentleman? The GVB. Oh, okay. I was going to ask about the 6 objectives that he mentioned out about establishing a regional fees, but I'll table that until he comes in. Going to the former Senator Joanne Brown. Yeah, I would like to ask, this is a scenario that I would like to, I'm foreseeing in terms of our revenue and economic development on the island. Okay, the Port Authority, like you mentioned, that had vessels there established, and I was really thinking about establishing vendors around the port area, perhaps outside the gate, and see how we can bring the vendors down to promote cultural and perhaps our food delicacies here in Guam, and just to showcase what you have here, because I am envisioning that the CNMI could also do that. Should the cruise liners come over to the CNMI? So, what is your take on that? When instead of these passengers going around the island in such a short term of time, should the vendors be able to go down? Thank you.
Well, I think the whole objective, though, of traveling in a ship, I'm assuming, is to actually be able to see the destination that you're going to. But I think the opportunity could be in that interim period. Sometimes the waiting to get from the ship to board the bus, or vice versa, getting off the, taxis or the bus, and the interim time perhaps to boarding the vessel. Unfortunately, none of those things can be allowed within the security areas. I mean, once you get past a certain line, that's it. You're not going to be able to have that opportunity. But those things can be looked at. I mean, there's different tiers once you're outside of that security area where those opportunities could be there. I mean, we have, sometimes our singers, our native, dancers that are there performing. Again, those are things that perhaps at an alternate location, which is outside our main yard, that could be looked at, because like Hotel Wharf will still have multi-uses. It's not simply going to be for cruise passengers, but when you have a cruise vessel in, if we have the proper staircase equipment that can be brought in, so there's that nice transition, you accommodate older people, persons with disabilities, then when you don't need it, you simply wheel it away and bring it back when you need it. And then while we have limited space, that's something that really has to be looked at, because if you go down there and you look at pretty much the port and everything heading down to our family beach and down the glass breakwater was all backfill. And it's actually very narrow once you get past the main port area and our leased properties that Mobile and other places have. So we'd really have to look at how we can maximize that, or areas along the location, maybe not a permanent setup, but things that can be put in intermittently when vessels are in or out. But the potential is there. But the security requirements, again, we have to see how that can be addressed and yet still accommodate that welcoming environment that we would like to have. Years past, I mean, we're going to be demolishing Warehouse 2, and I was really surprised to find out that the second floor actually used to have a karaoke lounge. Back in the day, especially because we had a lot of our fishing industry here, and they would simply accommodate. We had a restaurant there where people at the port, people from the outside could come in and go eat at that restaurant in Warehouse 2. In today's world, that would be totally unheard of. I mean, we have to have security requirements. We have to have either, our passes or our own identification or our TWIC cards to be able to enter the yard. So those days of the duty-free and all that we used to have port side, we cannot have now. But we certainly could look at within that area what could be set up, some standard that could be put in place so that when the cruise ship is coming in, we move everything else back and we can set up these locations for performances, dances, maybe the food sampling that you're talking about. Because that, if I'm on vacation, that's what I'd like to see if I were in a cruise ship going and visiting. Or also vendors selling, especially if it's made in Guam, we like that even better. Or made in Saipan or made in Rota, whatever the case may be, to stimulate the economy and the wonderful opportunity that we have with this to actually promote our culture. Because if it's something that can economically generate money and reinvest it back, so our people, there's value in learning the language, there's value in learning the music, there's value in doing the handicrafts and things that otherwise, in many of our neighboring islands as well, as we are experiencing here, is becoming a lost art. We're starting to see that revitalization, but the opportunity is there. It's just we need to lay that out to see what's workable, still allow the port to operate. And yes, of course, the primary concern is meeting the security requirements.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I was just thinking about the economic and the revenue impact on that perspective. And as I understand that Guam offers like honeymooners tourism. So that is one that, I always see as a cultural revenue as well for the CNMI. So, I'm trying to put a comparison and a contrast between Guam and the CNMI.
I think the thing is, I just want to add, I think we just need to be a lot more aggressive. Ron was talking about the beautification. I mean, we've talked about that for years, and we've made incremental movements towards that. The maintenance of facilities, the things that, when you really consider our bread and butter issues in relation to still, in this day and age, even though we have other, the military and other things here on Guam, tourism is still such a major industry, but we haven't quite bridged that gap there. where we don't address with consistency the maintenance of facilities and the visual experience that people are going through. And probably sometimes, I don't know if you've ever done this, but experience what it's like to be a tourist in your own island and actually go through the process of what a visitor will go through, and in your own experience, see what it is you'd like to see improved. Because for all the millions of dollars we receive from the industry, I think there's a little more we can display, so to speak, to make it an enticing experience and make people want to come back. You always hear from friends and relatives that live back in the mainland, and they talk about, their cruise ship trips down to the Caribbean and how exotic that is. And somehow we don't see ourselves that way. And yet in the world, we're a diminishing resource. And I think we need to look at it that way and look at it as something valuable and something that we take pride in and something that we can advertise, and be very proud of. But we just need to polish the product, because if we don't, what do we have different from anywhere else? There's always someplace cheaper and more enticing. But there's certainly more we can do to bridge that gap and promote the wonderful things we want to share.
Thank you, Senator. Madam Chair, that's it. That's okay. I'll ask question with him later. Thank you.
Speaker?
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to all of the comments made on this issue, it strikes me that one of the biggest negative effects, if you will, is the enhanced security requirements resulting, after 9/11. A lot of safety concerns have now raised the level of security and restrictions and everything that wasn't there prior to that. And because this issue is, that could greatly affect our ability to market our islands. And perhaps worse is the experience of these tourists after coming here will have, which could, hurt our repeat customer from coming back. And I just wonder if this is an issue maybe we ought to bring to our federal counterparts. I can understand at the airport because of 9/11. I wonder if the same concerns are applicable for our tourists coming in from ships. Should security requirements be that heightened? Can they be laxed for this industry, at least for that period of time? Are there things we can do locally, our own government agencies? We have control over agencies under our government. We have very little to no control over policies that come from yonder. And so I guess my concern is to, as the gentleman in uniform suggested, request or relay this issue to his superiors, to the decision makers, and maybe via resolution from us, at least relaying the concerns that were raised to the relevant federal agencies. It just makes no sense. These passengers, I don't know for our docks whether it's to protect the dock facilities that these stringent requirements are there for. Is it to protect the tourists who are coming here, or to protect us? I don't know really why the need for that. But if these requirements are lessened so that the experience is not as stressful, if you will, that's exactly the kind of thing that Mr. Laguna Ron was suggesting. And Madam Speaker, I wanted to ask that perhaps we consider in our one of the things we're going to do, the resolution, is to raise this matter and bring it forth to them. Maybe they don't know. Maybe it is something that can be laxed. But until we bring it to their attention, they obviously are not going to do anything about it. So I think it's worth doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield the floor over to my Vice Chair, who's had a lot of experience as a passenger within the cruise industry, and he is an advocate for the cruise industry. He's been working for this for a very long time and has put a lot of the stakeholders together at this time. Vice Speaker Cruz, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think we can look at this in three different ways. I think, and I'd like the cruise industry and the Cruise Association to, there's the cruises that will start from Guam and go just to the Mariana Islands, which might have the lessened, not as heightened security as the speaker was pushing for, since it's based out of here, and we know everybody was cleared and started here, and it's just going to stay within the Mariana Islands. I took a cruise that went to all the Hawaiian Islands that started out of Honolulu, and we got on and off without having to clear with each one of the islands because it was part of the Hawaiian Islands. And then when we went out to Christmas Island and came back in, yeah, there were some clearances coming back in. But just as between the islands, that would make it easier because it's just within the Marianas. You have a second tier when you're going out to the APIL Blue Continent countries that we're going with. And that's going to have to take some kind of coordination between this organization and APIL to try to figure out whether or not there can be some kind of reduced security clearances to be able to do that. But that's going to have to be something that they have to agree to because of the fact that they are independent countries. And then we'll have to go up through CBP to try to figure out whether or not in their return that can be cleared. There is a completely different clearance that are be coming in from Australia and from Japan. That's a whole third, and that completely is different. The other thing that I'd like to bring to everybody's attention is that about the dozen cruises that I've been on, there doesn't need to be though I have advocated for it and I have been very outspoken here in the legislature about the fact that I wanted to have a cruise terminal at the port. In the cruises that I've taken, it's not imperative. You can get off the ship in the little boats that they all have, and they can land anywhere. I've gone to the Galapagos, and there was no pier for it. I took a cruise up the eastern side of South America, and in the big countries, there was dockside berthing, but other times it was just outside the reef, and we came in on boats. And so there are different ways that this can be handled, and we don't need to wait until the port builds a several million dollar terminal to really get this thing going, because they can either come in at Agate Marina, or they can come into Agana Marina, or they can, if there's other ways that it can be brought in other ways that where there's a cut in the reef, that the boats can come in, and in many of the cruises that I've been on, that's the way that they've come. We've been able to come off without having to go into a port. So there's no need for any major infrastructure investment in a terminal before we can start this. But one of the things that I've been really pushing for was to try to have a cruise that's based out of Guam that goes to the Marianas, because I think the Marianas are the most beautiful set of islands that you can possibly go. The uniqueness of going up to Pagan and to, the entire chain would make for an absolutely phenomenal cruise that a lot of people would fly into the Guam International, the A.B. Wampat Guam International Airport to be able to go out of the Jose de Leon Guerrero port to get out to the rest of the islands. But that's one that we can start with as MILA, that we can try to address, and then through APIL try to do the one where the cruise would start from Guam, go up to Saipan, go to Yap and Palau and Chuuk and the whole Blue Continent set. That would be a whole second cruise, and then have a third effort to try to bring in from Japan and from Hong Kong and from Australia the lines that'll come and transit through Guam. But there's all kinds of different ways of dealing with this, and I really do think that, as the speaker said, there are things that we have within our control. And as MILA, I think maybe the one thing that we can and should try to push for the hardest is try to figure out if we can get a cruise, not 1,000 passenger ship, but it can be, you know, as small as 60. I've gone out to Ecuador in a 60, and now I understand there are now 200 passenger ships that are going out to Ecuador at a time. But they don't have to be the 1,000, but just a couple of hundred that would go just into the Marianas. And if we can do that, that would be the start. And then from there, we can try to get bigger ships that maybe want to do the Blue Continent, and then invite the Queen Elizabeth to come in once or twice a year from Hong Kong and Australia. But I really do think there are things that we can start with ourselves as MILA. And I hope that that's what we're going to be able to do. And I understand the problems that you have with clearance, because it's a combination of trying to make sure that you don't bring in strange plants and animals from other countries. So I understand customs and quarantine, and but I think if we can start with something that's based out of Guam or even out of Saipan, but just go around and without the huge investment up front. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Mr. Perez would like to respond.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Senator Cruz. Without any exceptions, everything that the good senator has laid out, we totally agree with. One of the long-term visions we had was creating a home port for a small vessel in the Marianas, and to have this opportunity, it would really resolve a lot of the government formality issues and generate immediate opportunities. As it turns out, when Senator Barnes and I and others went to did some sales calls on the West Coast, we actually met with Crystal Morgan, who's the senior analyst and market planner for Princess Cruise Lines. Princess Cruise Lines belong to a company that controls about 47% of total vessels worldwide. And so on the West Coast, they have a lot of these vessels. And the good senator actually posed a question: what if you based a ship on Guam? And of course, a couple things came up. Number one, the size vessel that was required. And number two, if they base a vessel on Guam, for example, of appropriate size, would they get the same number, would they get the same return basing it here as they would elsewhere? To that point, I think an opportunity arises, Senator, where we might consider exploring the possibility of MILA as an organization in concert with local folks here, perhaps charter for a trial period, whether it's 6 months to a year, an expeditionary type vessel to operate that way. And this can be done, of course, overnight, but I think in the medium term, it's, in my opinion, quite feasible to explore.
Can,
And I think we had the perfect opportunity to find a liner to. I did not realize that the Pritzker family that Hyatt
Yeah.
owns Carnival. And Tom and I were classmates. So when I spoke to their manager, I'm going to be trying to see if I can talk to Tom into staging one ship
Yeah.
out here.
Yeah, this kind of initiative actually is long-range planning because they make sales like 2 to 3 years in advance. It's not like air passengers where two weeks you can, this is one of those things where there's 2 to 3 or 4 years out planning. They develop the product, they develop the sales tools, and then they market it. But I think there's a real opportunity to do that in our own small way in the Marianas. If we do that, that model can actually be exported to the rest of Micronesia, including a policy framework that would allow one clearance point within Micronesia, so that it doesn't matter what island you go to, immigration, customs are pretty much unified. And before just concluding, I want to address the good Congresswoman's point about the fees and charges that you were interested in. We realize that each port has a different cost structure of operation. So we can never aspire to having a unified schedule of fees and charges. The idea that we had is twofold. Number one, there's a lot of regulatory requirements, environmental, safety, other issues that I think we can work on to have pretty much a common ground of agreement. With respect to the fees and charges, however, if as a policy matter, MILA is committed to developing this industry, then it would seem to me, and probably to others, that there might be some accommodation on a special waiver or a special charge just for this segment as we try to develop it and try to grow it. So those are just some last minute thoughts.
Thank you very much. Can you just answer one question for everybody here? Is that my understanding is that you've actually, the association, Micronesian cruise liners, have actually looked at all the ports. So what size are all of the islands basically capable of bringing these cruise liners? Small, medium, large?
For the most part, Guam and the CNMI and maybe Palau and I believe the Marshalls are the only islands that can really accommodate these great big vessels. But the absorptive capacity for most of the islands in Micronesia in terms of land side services is so limited that we really are encouraging more the expeditionary type vessels to which the senator has alluded to. And in some cases, by special arrangement with advanced planning, have some of those around the world cruisers that come through our region to participate. There are two kinds of large vessels that come through our area. One of them is when they redeploy vessels from where they are in Europe or the US to Asia, and instead of sailing those vessels empty, they make cruise sales to help defray the cost. The other one is like the Crystal Serenity that's coming to Saipan, actually, and Guam as well in February. This is an around-the-world cruise where typically how this works is maybe 10 to 15% go on around the world, but the rest of them are broken into like 3 different segments. So the first segment, some people buy that cruise, and then the second segment, and then the third segment. But it's only a small percentage that really goes around around the world for that price. Only Senator Benjamin Cruz can afford that round the world cruise.
Vice Speaker, are you done?
AARP.
Okay, Senator Dueñas, you recommend.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate a couple of APILs ago we were up in Saipan, and thanks to the President and other members, there was a presentation with Mr. Jerry Perez on this issue, and I guess the only real comment in terms of all the housekeeping issues, those are things whether their airplanes coming in with guests, or even more importantly, just ourselves in terms of housekeeping that need to be done. But moving along, I think there was one coined phrase that I heard with regard to infrastructure because it's so overwhelmingly expensive. This is one industry where it's not build it and they will come. It's with floating hotels, they come and then you start building it, build as you need. Because as Jerry Perez pointed out, the terminal issues, and the good vice speaker pointed out, the terminal issues are logistics that the cruise line industry is used to. That's what they do. And so one of the unique issues of the floating hotels is that they have their contained infrastructure, and wherever they go, they can expand or contract as needed with regard to embarkation and disembarkation. So I think, before we throw the wet blanket on ourselves with regard to infrastructure, the reality is that this is a very unique industry. And in closing, I think one of the uniqueness to it is we live in the world in seasons. We know in Micronesia, we probably say sometimes we only have 2 seasons, wet and dry. But the fact is we have mango season, we have iba season, and and Maniahak season. As a fisherman, we have Maniahak season, we have mahi and wau and tuna. Well, tuna's always here mostly. But anyways, to speak to it really is that is the uniqueness. To me, it's a tourism enhancer. And it's something that even, I know that Jerry, you've talked about this, and maybe you have one comment with regard to this, and I know Carl's talked about this. This is a great off-season, off-peak season tourism element as a filler, where our logistics are a little bit more, less strained. So it's a manageable market, and it's expandable, contractable from my research and everything else. I just wanted to throw those points out, that it doesn't have to be as overwhelming as it seems. It's a lot more about, taking advantage of the season when it's there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Oh, Senator, Congressman?
Thank you. Just very brief. I know, I'm sure our port enforcement agencies are doing all they can under their lines of responsibilities, but I don't want to put Ariel here on the spot. But having been in charge of CNMI immigration for years, we hear this from people like Ariel and others on Saipan that serve as the handlers for these cruise liners, and basically you hear, I guess the main feedback that you get from people involved in this line of businesses is the clearance that is provided, and we've alluded to the change as of 9/11. We mentioned pre-clearance and all that, and basically that was the incentive and the main feedback that we get back is that the ground agents, the tourists, their immediate feedback is how much they appreciated being able to immediately disembark upon arriving in the CNMI. And I think the gentleman over here who's told a story about having people rush in and out of tourist sites and all that are all as a result of the limited time that these people have on the ground. And without putting Ariel here on the spot, I think it's important that we ask people like him whether the current arrangement and the current sort of protocol is I don't know what's the term, whether it's sufficient or adequate or acceptable. But I think we got to start there, because we can talk about all of this, that what we can do and what we cannot do, but I think we have to take the time to listen to people that actually go out and try to solicit business of this nature. If you don't want to respond, Ariel, but basically is what you're getting back from the cruise liners that you represent or you serve, are they acceptable in regards to the current services that are being provided by our jurisdictions?
Yeah. Normally before the vessel arrives, you know, we tell them on what the clearance time will be, and how many inspectors will be provided by, you know, by Guam or by Saipan. And so far the only one that we had some negative comments is from the Arcadia. They have a few thousand passengers, and I believe it took us nearly 6 hours before we cleared the ship. So that includes the Coast Guard, though, the Coast Guard inspection and everything. So yeah,
And-
nearly 6 hours.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, because knowing the experience with cruise liners and the amount of time they have in port are basically they come in the morning, and by 4 or 5 o'clock, the end of the day, they're ready to get on their way. And if they spend, and maybe the question is what is the approximate or you know time that vessels get cleared in any port of call, because if they are here for like an 8 hour, 9 hours, and then they wait around, some of these passengers wait around 2 hours, 3 hours before they actually get on the island, you know, then we obviously are losing a lot of economic opportunities, and because of you're trying to squeeze so much into a shorter time frame, the experience becomes, and I think for a lot of people, you know, could be less than desirable. Tours are cut short. People don't have the free time to walk by themselves on some of these so-called unescorted time on the island. So I think it's stuff like that we need to look at, and you know, I know CBP has a major role in this, but I hope that the truth is resolution that MILA would eventually adopt, that the issue can be officially put to the attention of the stakeholders that can make the needed change or improvement in this, because again, I look at the list, and I'm not saying that it's the services, but I you know, like any other business arrangement, you go where your customers are satisfied, and basically, for years that I can remember back in the so-called cruise line season, I remember when we have like 15 vessels. At a time, I had to detail people from my staff from CNMI Immigration over here to pre-clear 3 vessels in a weekend from Guam to the CNMI. And I look at the list and I see the Nippon Maru and the Asuka, and they're still there, the Pacific Venus, but and I see the arrival and departure dates, and these are far in between. Back then, they have a quicker turnaround, but we kind of sense that there would be changes, because we, and I hate to say this, but when they come to Saipan and they receive, and they were able to immediately get off, disembark, and get on their tours, they complain about what they had to go through here. And I think some of the agents were saying that some of the cruises were going to cancel out. And these are from some time back. I'm not necessarily saying that those are the only factors that would, but I think it's important that, like I say, we, you know, when you've got a shorter time on land, import, that we try to address this. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I think we have to accept the fact. We have to accept the fact that we can talk about infrastructures and all this, but how do we expedite disembarking of passengers? Chair, thank you.
If I could say a few,
Yes,
thank
please.
you, Congressman. Good points. You know, for me, Ariel, and I want to tell you, you know, for Guam Customs, one of the things that we try to do, you know, customer service is very, very important to us, you know, and we're always interested in first impression. You know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And that happens also with not just the airport, but at the cruise line. So when you do get these comments, you know, you mentioned 6 hours. I was just doing, wow, that's a long time. And of course, I wasn't there. I'm not sure what the different, you know, it's a process to clear, but what part of it took that long. But I'm interested in actually find out how to get customs, how we can improve. So when you do hear these comments, at least for me, I'm interested about Guam Customs. And if you have anything that you have coming from any feedback from the ships as they pull out of here that relates to Guam Customs, I'm interested in it, because you know we need to improve and make this package work. And like I said, the end game is to get the tourists smiling out of the ship, out to visit our beautiful island. That's the game. That's the objective. And we need to do it correctly. We need to do our job, but we need to keep that as a priority. So it is a priority. So you know, I'm very interested to find out in the future when you or even your past, if you have these comments, I'm hoping they're giving to you in writing so we can share it with me. Give me a copy. So I want to read them, because you know I want to acknowledge and I want to find out what happened and how do we not repeat a problem. And so you know we'll always this is a priority. Okay, and just like the priority for General at the port, it's a priority. You know, there's a lot of things going on, but when a ship comes in, I'll tell you, there's no bigger priority in the Port Authority of Guam than when a ship comes in, because sometimes the container vessels have to stay out. It's a priority. So you know, we take it very, very seriously, and so if you hear these comments, and more importantly, if they put it in writing, please share it with us. Because again, I wanna improve the product, and again, if we all improve the product a little bit, in the end game, you're going to have more time on land, and then these tourists will be happy to spend their money, and we will be happy to take their money, and everybody will be a lot happier. So please help us out, and we will try our best to minimize those problems for the next vessel, because as you know, we want more vessels to come, and we don't want to give anybody any negative impression about coming to Guam. I don't want anybody to regret coming to Guam. We want them to tell their friends to come more, right? So help us out and we'll help you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and entertain Mr. Scambaluri and then Mr. Dumapet.
Just a short thing, that this is one thing that we cannot compromise security and the protection of the assets in Guam and also our island. So there's one thing that we will not try to compromise, is the security issues pertaining to our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you. We understand that. Mr. Dumapet, did you
Sir,
have a...
ma'am, I would just like to add that what Representative Sablan was talking about, you know, many years ago is the Club Med 2. That is actually a ship that goes only to Guam, Saipan, and Rota, and they considered on having Guam their home port. But there was some issues with both sides, Guam and Saipan's customs and immigration officers back then. So all of a sudden they decided that they said the owner of Club Med sent a representative to Saipan, and we actually my boss, not me, but he went and talked to some government officials back then, and the answer that they get is, if you don't like it here, then we don't need you. So, yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. So that's the experience that, you know, I just, and our company, Inscape Shipping, is attending this cruise association every year. And as a matter of fact, in Miami, one of my bosses represents, you know, we gathered information about Guam and the Micronesia, Saipan, of course, and we try to sell out all islands and send their cruise ships here. So we made success on some of them, and you know, we're still trying to get the Club Med back, because you know, that was like two port calls on Guam every week, two port calls on Saipan, and then one in Rota. So
I think what's really important, to know is that the information and getting as we look at what the list of what we have to revisit here and re-synergize what we want to do with the cruise industry, it's important that we have a collaboration with the itinerary planners within the cruise industry, and being able to go to those conferences like in Miami or in Asia where it's at Singapore. I think one of the main things that the islands need to do is to work closely with the itinerary planners, and I know that the president of MCA has been working closely with trying to bring everybody back together. It was recommended, ladies and gentlemen, that one of thing that could do was, as we continue to move this forward, is to come in at these conferences as one big, we call ourselves the Blue Continent now, and with MILA or MILA, it's the Marianas. So that we look at saving on resources and construction and all that as we go out there, as that we come in as one team Marianas, or one team the Blue Continent. And that's something that MCA has been really looking at working with, because the concerns of what is beyond our control and what is a very big player here is our status on the security clearances at all levels of play. And one question I did have to ask was, you talked about the Silver Expedition being able to come real soon. Like, there's a meeting on Thursday, right? What that expedition, what are we looking at hosting? What are you guys looking at hosting in as far as passengers?
Actually, ma'am, this meeting on Thursday is concerning about the island of Pagan. And the people that we talked to in Saipan, like the Marianas Visitors Authority, is considering on having some vendors, you know, go to Pagan, and some other interested parties who wants to do business in Pagan when the ship stops there. And this is the first time that we are meeting. It will be on Thursday. We just had an informal one in our office in Saipan, so everything will be discussed this coming Thursday.
Hopefully we can get some feedback.
Sure.
Also, one thing that hasn't been tapped into, and one of my colleagues would like to at least briefly tap into, is the economics of this industry. And I'm going to go ahead and yield the floor over to Senator Mike Limchiaco. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for being late. I had a prior meeting with DPW Director Carl Dominguez. But one of the things that I'd like to open up the discussion for, or at least get some feedback on, is the economics of the cruise industry. And Jerry and representatives from Inchcape, as well as our colleagues, have we really taken a hard look at the economics of it, and whether or not there's a business model that makes sense? Because there are some cost prohibitive sides to our location, right? And the cost to fly into Guam from, let's say, the U.S. mainland or any of the other locations. You know, have we taken a hard look at the economics of it and the business model to see if it really does fit a price point for whatever target market we're trying to attract to this area?
The short answer is yes. And I'm not sure whether we have adequate time to go through all the details, and I'd be happy to spend some time with you on the side to give you a lot of background on what we've done and how we've quantified the opportunity. But in short, we don't need necessarily major super investments to pay that, because we don't necessarily need a fancy terminal. For a terminal to be justified, you need about 350 to 450,000 passengers to make it work. That's the economic model. But we can do a lot of things like is being done now around the world in isolated destinations. We just have a little area that's clean, put up a tent, have a safe environment where you can have the processing take place. And so the average spend on an aggregate basis in the Caribbean, for example, this is like multiple islands, right? The average spend is about $105 to in the upper end, American Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. It's higher end because it's in dollars. But in the aggregate, the average spend is about $105 to $115 per person. We're not able to achieve that level of spending on Guam with the 20 or 30 some thousand passengers that have come through here for two reasons. Reason number one is the lack of shore time, okay? And number two, we've not developed our commercial infrastructure and our institutional capacity on the commercial side to maximize on that benefit. So we're guessing that we're probably only getting maybe $20 or $25 spent per visitor here, because we have not developed that. But that can grow to over $100 per person if we really work at it.
And from the cruise line perspective, the long, potentially long cruise time, right, at sea cruise times, just to get to Guam or this
yeah, we were just discussing this earlier. There are several profiles of cruisers coming to Guam. One profile is the around the world cruises, where we happen to be en route, and it's added value for them to stop by. Another is a regional cruise from either Asia or Australia that extends to our area, and that too is another profile. Yet another profile is redeployment of vessels, where they move either seasonally or just business opportunities from the North America to Asia, for example. So instead of sending those vessels empty, they sell tours en route. That happened recently with like Princess Cruises, for example. This next year, they're going to have 2 ships deployed out of Japan, and that extra vessel is coming through here as part of the schedule. Also in February, Crystal Cruise Line, Crystal Serenity to be specific, is going to make a call in Saipan and Guam in part of their around the world tour. Crystal Cruise every year has been rated the #1 luxury cruise vessel by Condé Nast. So it's important for us to give as good an experience for their visitors as we can in order to sustain that level of interest. But with respect to the economic model that you were talking about, it is a very feasible industry for Guam.
Okay. And then on the regional model, what would it take? I know we've identified the several issues on the agenda regarding customs and that experience, as well as the facilities. But is there any other incentive for a cruise line to call Guam like a home port, if it were a regional model that we're looking at? And if so, what?
Yeah, we were just discussing that earlier, and we have an opportunity really to have a small expeditionary vessel, maybe 100 passengers or under that size, to be home ported on Guam. When we were with Crystal Cruise Line, we talked to Crystal Morgan, who is the planner for Crystal Cruises. And we actually, the good senator actually posed a question about the feasibility of posting a vessel here. And it's very doable. The only question is whether, if they dedicate that vessel to Guam, if they have a vessel like that, would they make as much money operating out of Guam as they would elsewhere? And so that's an initiative that I think we're starting to gain traction on in terms of discussing what the details are, because the planners go 3, 4, 5 years out. For example, the cruise that's coming to our area, those cruises have been sold like 3 years ago. So it's one of those kinds of industries where it doesn't turn on a dime, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And on the expeditionary vessels, now the target then would be people that fly into Guam, and then hop on that expeditionary
No,
vessel,
there are different profiles on that. Of all the vessels that come through here, and I think Errol can probably speak to this better than I can, typically a few would fly in. On the round-the-world on the round-the-world ships, for example, typically how this works is maybe 10 or 15% really go around the world, and the rest broken up in thirds. So some of them sell and take cruises in the first third, some in the middle third, some in the last third. So that's one, that's one opportunity. Regionally, as it relates to the islands of Micronesia, the expeditionary vessels actually make more sense to that because of their absorptive capacity, shoreside. You know, the commercial capacity, the services capacity on shore. So the larger vessels, in terms of physical size of the ship, can be accommodated in Guam, Sinamai, Marshalls, Palau. But in terms of the number of passengers on board, it really doesn't make sense to put like a Holland America cruise in the middle of Yap. Although it'd be nice, but it's not very compatible.
Okay, thank you, Senator. It's now, of course, 12 noon. Our staff are diligently working to prepare several resolutions. So, but what I like to do then is they have passed out a copy of the resolution in draft form. I'd like everyone to, I know we're going to break for lunch. And if you can have some conversations at least about it and even take it even further, Senator Limtiaco, with those who are here, because we want to invite our guests who are here to please join us for lunch as well. And so we are going to recess until 2 this afternoon.